But that day I was in Port-au-Prince doing errands. It happened that I was in a vehicle that didn't belong to me. It belonged to the Toyota dealer. I was driving around Port-au-Prince doing errands. I'd finished with my errands. I was getting ready to go back to my home when the vehicle broke down. I called the Toyota dealer to come and fix the vehicle that they'd lent to me. And their people just arrived and they just started working on the vehicle when the earthquake hit. So I was standing on the side of the road next to this truck when the earthquake hit. It was pretty hard. It almost knocked me off my feet, but not quite. And there were many, many people around. I was in a zone called Delma 3, which is down at the bottom of the hill, close to Cité Soleil. People were shouting, going crazy, saying, "God save me," things like that. The quake lasted about 30 seconds. When it was over, there was a big cloud of dust that rose up just a short way from me, and I realized that I went to go and investigate. It turns out it was a school, and this 3-story school had come down completely. And there were many people crying out from the wreckage, saying, "Come and save me." And there were a few people we were able to get out pretty quickly, like they weren't too badly trapped. But after that, it got more and more difficult. Not many people wanted to go in the wreckage because there were still aftershocks, and it was a little bit scary. But I decided that I was going to go underneath the roof. So there were 3 stories to the building. The people on the 1st and 2nd stories were dead, very dead. Some people on the 3rd story had survived. They'd fallen that distance, but the roof hadn't completely collapsed on top of them. So some of them were still alive. And I was able to find a place where I could get in underneath the roof and look for survivors. And remember, it was late in the day. The earthquake happened at 4:45. So there wasn't much daylight left in the day. But right when I climbed underneath the roof, the first thing I saw was a dead body. And the next thing I saw was this girl who was yelling out, and she said, "Come and help me. There's only one piece of concrete that's blocking me. Help me pull it out of the way." And I said, "You know, I'm going to help you. Just stop yelling. Yelling is not going to help me. Just pray." I said, "Just pray for yourself and pray for me that I can help you." And so she started praying, and I was pulling rubble out of the way. And one guy helped me. One guy, he stood on top, and I passed rubble up to him to get it out of the way. And eventually I got to where I could actually get to the girl. And she said, "This piece of rubble is in my way." And I pulled it. I could not move it. And I said, "Just wait. I'm going to go and get some sort of tool." And I asked the guy up above to go and get a hammer. And he came back with a hammer, and I crawled underneath again. And I was lying on my belly, hitting this piece of concrete with a hammer. And eventually we broke it up into several pieces, and I was able to pull out some pieces, and then eventually for the larger pieces, I pulled and the girl pushed, and we were able to get them out and eventually push them up and out of the way. And so she was very lucky, and we pulled her out, and she had maybe a broken arm. And a broken arm, but she was in a pretty bad state emotionally, and she was very glad to get out. But from that point on, it got a lot more difficult because the people were much more tightly stuck, and I moved over to sort of a different place where I could get in and crawl underneath. And every time an aftershock hit, it was kind of like all of a sudden I imagined what it would be like to be buried underneath all this rubble and my family not know where I was. And it was pretty bad to think about, but the worst thing was thinking about these kids being stuck under this rubble. And I found this one girl and all I could see was her head and one arm. And she said, "Help me, help me, help me." I said, "I'm going to help you, don't worry. Just pray, and pray for me that I can help you." And I said, "What's your name?" And she said, "Jacqueline." I said, "I'm going to help you, Jacqueline," and started pulling out rubble. But it was a lot more difficult, and it had already started to get dark. And I pulling out rubble and pulling out rubble and pulling out rubble. And then there was one very big piece of rubble, and I thought, if I can get that piece out, then maybe that'll free up some other smaller pieces that I can get out, and then I'll actually be able to pull her out. And then I saw a foot. And I kind of looked and I looked and I looked, and I'm like, that's Jacqueline's foot. And I touched her foot and I said, can you feel that? And she said, feel what? And I realized it was Jacqueline's foot, and she had a broken back. And I kept working, and I managed to pull the enormous piece of concrete out, and then the other guy helped me lift it up, and we got it out of the hole and out. And it was getting dark, and I went to pull away the thing that was behind that piece of rubble, and as soon as I touched it, I heard a scream. And what it was is I was touching a girl. And it was a girl had been trapped behind that piece of rubble. And all I could see, she was compressed in like on her hands and knees. And so all I could see was her bum. And her head was underneath rubble completely. But she was screaming. And I couldn't hear a single word she said because her head was completely buried underneath this rubble. She could probably barely breathe. And it was just, it was kind of a very stressful situation, got even worse at that point. And I'm realizing there's nothing I can do. And I managed to pull out a few more pieces of rubble, and I was talking with Jacqueline, and at one point I just couldn't see anymore, and I went to borrow a flashlight, and nobody had a flashlight. And I realized after a couple minutes that even if somebody had a flashlight, there was no way they were going to give me a flashlight. There was no way, because everybody needed a flashlight, because everybody needed to go and find their friends and family that were trapped under rubble. And the weight of the disaster started to kind of weigh on me, and I realized that the scope, you know, and how many people were underneath buildings that had fallen. And I was feeling very desperate because I couldn't work anymore. It was too dark for me to work. And I went back and I said to Jacqueline, I said, Jacqueline, I have to leave. I need to come back with some more help. Right? I can't work anymore unless I have some more help. But remember that I'm coming back, and remember that your parents are going to be looking for you, and just keep praying. And she said, okay. And so then I left, and the vehicle that was broken down was gone because the Toyota people had hauled it away. And so I walked all the way across Port-au-Prince. Eventually I found a bus that was leaving town. Then I got on the bus, and then eventually I got back to here after 9 p.m. in the evening. And my wife was very happy to see me. I couldn't sleep, obviously, but I came up, but before I even left Port-au-Prince, I already knew what we were going to do the next day. And the next morning, as soon as my workers showed up, I said, go load all of our tools in the truck. We're driving to Port-au-Prince, and we're going to be pulling people out of buildings today. So we're not building filters today, we're going to be pulling people out of buildings. They all loaded everything in the truck. We brought a jackhammer, we brought sledgehammers, we brought a rebar cutter, and all 17 of our workers, and a little portable generator. And we went back to the same school, and as soon as I got there, somebody recognized me from the night before, and he said, you don't need to go look, they're already dead. And Jacqueline was dead, and the other girl was dead. And I realize now that they would have died anyway. I mean, the girl with a broken back, she would have died anyway, and the other girl would have died anyway. They were just too badly hurt. But it was still pretty hard to see that they died. The good part of the story, though, is that with the tools we brought, we were able to go in through the top of the roof and make holes through the concrete, and we pulled out 6 more girls who were alive. And that felt pretty good. And all the day that we were working, we were sending our truck to the hospital full of patients. We sent 3 truckloads full of patients. And so we did a lot of good.